Hello everyone, Ison Phillips here. Welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, I do tech reviews, tutorials, and tips for audio, video, and photo. So if that's something you're interested in, hit the subscribe button below. With the release of Canon's new G7X Mark III and the release of Sony's ZV-1, you may think that the G7X Mark II might be irrelevant. Well, is it? Yes! Or no. Let's talk about it. Canon introduced the G7X Mark II in 2016, and it has an amazing array of features for a point-and-shoot camera. It's also one of the best vlogging cameras on the market. I like to call it a point-and-shoot camera with benefits. Although, it's hard to really call this a point-and-shoot camera. Some of the benefits include Canon's Digic 7 processor and a 20-megapixel 1-inch sensor. It has a 24 to 100 millimeter equivalent zoom lens, with a maximum aperture of 1.8 and 2.8. That's 1.8 at 24 millimeter and 2.8 at the maximum range of 100 millimeters. That's pretty impressive. That means you're going to get better blurred background or bokeh throughout the entire focal range. Now before I go any further with the features of the G7X Mark II, let me give you the #1 feature in my book, and that's the price. Right now on Canon's website you can get a refurbished G7X Mark II for $400. And that gives you a full 1-year warranty. So it's just like getting a brand new camera for, I don't know, $300 less than the original price. And also, that's about $300 less than the G7X Mark III. We'll get into that a little bit later. The G7X Mark II has excellent autofocus. It's not the dual pixel autofocus like the Canon M50, but it's a contrast-based autofocus and it works really well. The autofocus has 31 points of autofocus, and it also has face tracking, which makes it an excellent camera for vlogging. The tilting touchscreen flips up so you can see yourself vlogging or when you're taking selfies. It's also great for taking shots at upward or downward angles. The G7X Mark II shoots video in 1080p in 24 frames per second, 30 frames per second, and 60 frames per second. It does not do 4K. One of the great features of the G7X Mark II is its built-in neutral density filter. If you're not familiar with neutral density filters, it simply means like sunglasses for your lens. It darkens the lens so you can shoot in bright daylight at larger apertures to get a more blurry background. I'll show you a few examples. Okay, this is the camera in bright sunlight with no ND filter on. As you can see, it's kind of washed out. And this is the camera in bright sunlight with the ND filter on. As you can see, it makes quite a difference. The G7X Mark II does not have a microphone input, and that's pretty standard for most point-and-shoot cameras. So you're limited to using the camera's built-in microphone, which is okay. It does an adequate job. Of course, there's always the option of using an external microphone with a recorder and syncing it up later in post-production. But that's something that most people probably don't want to bother with. I'm going to show you some video and still images that I recently shot with the G7X Mark II, and I am really impressed with what this little camera can do. Okay, this is the camera in auto mode, and I'm just using it for vlogging. Walking along, using the image stabilization as well. Just trying to see how smooth the footage is going to be when I look at it later. The camera changes the exposure and the ISO to match the lighting that you're under, so makes it easier. You don't have to mess with a lot of settings while you're walking. At this point I don't have the ND filter on because I don't really need it. So far the downsides of the G7X Mark II is that it doesn't shoot 4K and it has no microphone input. Those are two things that the G7X Mark III has, so let's talk about that. According to most reviewers, the G7X Mark III shoots beautiful footage in 4K. However, there is a problem with overheating when shooting in 4K, and that is a problem. There's also a problem with the autofocus to the point where Canon had to introduce a firmware update to try to correct, and from the latest reports, it's better, but it's not as good as the G7X Mark II. Also, when Canon released the G7X Mark III, there was no 24 frames per second option when shooting video. Now this is something that Canon promised to correct in later firmware updates. I'm not sure this has been done yet. Maybe some of you will know the answer to that. Now, as I mentioned earlier, the G7X Mark III does have a microphone input. However, there's no hot shoes, so there's no way to mount a microphone on camera. Now, you can purchase one of these little devices that screws into the tripod socket on your camera that gives you a cold shoe that you could attach a microphone to. But that's an optional piece of equipment that you have to purchase. Now, I'll leave a link below in my description if you're looking for one of those. If you have a G7X Mark II, you could use one of these devices to attach an external light on your camera, like this. So, in answer to the question, is the G7X Mark II still relevant in 2020? I say yes. For the $400 price tag, the G7X Mark II does everything I need for this camera to do. As I said, the G7X Mark II does everything I need. I can live with the fact that it doesn't shoot in 4K, and I can live with the fact that it doesn't have a microphone input. So for me, the extra couple of $100 is not worth it to get the G7X Mark III, especially with all of its issues. Now, if money were no object, and I was looking to get another camera of this type with 4K capability and a microphone input, I probably would go with Sony's new ZV-1. And everything I've heard about that camera is very, very impressive. Check out some of the videos on YouTube about the Sony ZV-1. It just so happens the Sony ZV-1 was just a little bit out of my price range. If you're getting value from this video, hit the like button and consider subscribing. That is all for today, folks. Thank you so much for watching. Be safe out there, everyone. We'll see you in the next video.